Hi, I'm Ian McClintock, the founder of Charity Excellence. This video is part of our Charity AI Best Practice series, and I'm going to talk about imagery ethics and in particular AI. Watching and reading on social, AI imagery isn't authentic. We're not going to use it. I don't agree with that. Fake imagery has been around for a very, very long time, and its use is perfectly legitimate. You go to the movies and you watch Venom or Avengers. That's all fake, but it's great. So it's not the what. I would argue it's the how and the why that's ethical or not. And what could be ethical for one charity may not be ethical for another. So I'm not going to tell you how to be ethical and use imagery. What we've done is created a series of principles and a toolkit. And we've given you a framework, and you take from that what is relevant and works for you, and you ignore the rest of it. Because ethics are really about you, your role, your culture. They're about a whole series of different things. So they mean different things to different people. So unethical imagery isn't new. This is the Rhinelander case in New York in 1925. We had racism, we had misogyny, and we had fake imagery that was sensationalist, exploitative, even by the standards of the day. And you can see this is obviously fake. So it's not something that we haven't seen before. But what about this? It's an AI generated image of a young Ukrainian girl. It is completely fake. Should you use that for your fundraising for your Ukrainian charity? Is that ethical? And I think the answer is it may be, it depends how you do it. So stock imagery isn't authentic either. This is one I used on our website. It reflects very much our values and who we are. It's about we are really like young people and diversity, but actually Charity Excellence is run by me and I'm really old white bloke. So it's not us. I haven't actually taken this one down yet, but I do intend to. However, there isn't actually anything fundamentally wrong in using stock imagery. But what about photoshopping and cropping? So women's magazines where they Photoshop out so you've got thinner thighs or a thinner waist or a flawless complexion. And the politician crowded round by his enthusiastic supporters that when you actually look at the whole photograph, it's a little bunch of people in a gigantic empty community hall. They would say to you, we comply with the Advertising Standards Authority, we comply with the law, we are actually perfectly happy about what we're doing, that's okay. This is Madeira, taken by me. I'm an absolute rubbish photographer. So trust me, it was absolutely stunning. Cobalt Sea, volcanic. It's the Atlantic. And there was an Instagrammer there. She was sitting on the side of a fountain. She turned her face away because she had a spot on one side of her nose and that wouldn't look good in the image. And behind the photographer that was there with her were all the at tourist shops selling plastic beach balls and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure what she created was a fabulous image, certainly much better than mine. And she would say, I'm selling lifestyle. That's what I do. People know who I am. There is nothing wrong in what I'm doing. Which brings us to the question, we can't really decide what we should or shouldn't have in imagery until we're clear in our own minds what is ethical for us. Now, I've made this up with the help of AI. And I've gone through and I would suggest this is kind of in the ballpark, but you think about what works for you, but you need to be clear about this. So I would say it's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching. So the fact that people don't know about it doesn't mean it's okay. It's about fair, honest, respectful of others, being truthful, treating people with kindness and respect. And the final one that I really think sums it up is making choices that are good for everyone, not just for yourself. So if you go into Funding Finder, my grants directory, You will see we have ethics notes for anyone that produces services that members of our community may object to. Alcohol, cigarettes, gambling, military equipment. There are aspects in there that I personally don't worry about. They're not a problem for me. But I'm not doing this for me. If there are people in our community who would object to it, then we include it because it's about them. It's not about me. My opinion I'm entitled to hold, but it is not how we run the charity. Which brings me to it is about the charity, not you. Companies Act is the same. This is CC3 from the Charity Commission. Your role as a trustee or in management is to act at all times in your charity's best interests. And they go on to say, you must avoid putting yourself in a position where your duty to your charity conflicts with your personal interests or loyalty to any other person or body. I'm a veteran. I have got no problem with arms manufacturers, but if you go into charity excellence, you will see we have ethics notes because it's not my opinion that matters, it's your opinion. And there is no one size fits all. That's why this is a toolkit. So, for example, an arts charity might decide that using AI imagery is unethical. We're just not going to do it. Another might decide that it's a new and exciting medium that they want to exploit. They could both be right. They could both be wrong. I would argue that what matters is how you go about deciding what you will do and that you've systems and procedures that will ensure this is communicated openly and applied consistently. We have an ethics policy. It's available online. If you want to come to us and suggest that we should change it and it should be different, you're perfectly entitled to. We even include the email for you to contact us. We are absolutely transparent about what we do. So these are the principles I came up with. Again, this is work that I've created. You can amend this in any way that fits your culture and your charity. The first one's a bit kind of legal regulatory. Anything you do should forward the charitable purposes of your charity, because if it isn't, you shouldn't be doing it. Clearly, you need to meet legal and regulatory requirements, advertising standards, advertising agency, etc. And in terms of what you have decided for your charity, it is ethical for you and it minimizes risk or harm to others. So even if you meet all the other three, if you post something and it poses a risk to someone, you shouldn't do that. And the new Online Safety Act first begins to kick in on the 16th of March 25. That actually places legal obligations on you. So this is not only an ethical thing to do, in large measure, it will become legal as well. So starting with governance. The board is responsible for the legal, ethical, and safe use of imagery. The board is responsible for everything. You may delegate authority for people within your charity to do that, but you cannot delegate your responsibility. Ultimately, you are always responsible. And you should ensure that management oversight is in place and that it's working. Don't just sign off the policy and walk away. Identify and assess key risks. What are the risks to us in using imagery? And what steps do we need to take to ensure that these are managed properly? AI perception is just about how people see it. So, for routine, non-contentious stuff, yeah, does it really matter all that much? So, if you have a poster for your Christmas event with a cartoon Santa Claus on it, and you knock that up on Copilot, probably nobody's really going to be bothered whether they know whether it's AI or not, and even if they do, they're probably not that bothered. So, for that kind of stuff, yeah, it's not so big. And it also allows us to do things we can't with real imagery. So, in my previous last chief exec role, I was working with women who were being abused. We were dealing with alcohol, drugs. This is not the kind of thing that you can put on Instagram or on social media. One, because it's not appropriate, and two, because of the risk to them. With AI, using things like hyper-realistic cartoons, you can portray things in a way that you can't with real imagery. So there are campaigning opportunities here for us, specifically vulnerable beneficiaries. But I suggest that we wouldn't use it if our stakeholders would be really unhappy. So if you're part of an arts collective and it's about human creativity, and you've given them all the very best arguments about AI and they still go, we hate it, we don't want anything to do with it, then I would argue that that's something that we wouldn't do because we meet and support our stakeholders. And be mindful of bad actors if they could use that to undermine or harm your work. So if you used that image of the little Ukrainian girl and that allowed someone to then post it out and say, look, we're not slaughtering people in Ukraine. It's all absolute rubbish. It's Zelensky who's the dictator. And they're so desperate, they're having to use fake images. They're misleading you. So if I had an image and I thought a bad actor could use that to harm my charity, I would be very, very careful about using it. Systems and procedures. If you're going to share data, you have a data sharing agreement. It's best practice, not the law, and you've got appropriate consent. You wouldn't use an imagery library if you thought it was unethical. Well, AI data sets, I've got lots of questions about them. This is not easy, but I would suggest on principle that you would not use an AI data set if you had concerns around its ethical and legal safeguards. But you do not share images of people with external AI systems. ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, any of those kind of things, you automatically, by default, share the imagery with the rest of the world, and other people can then use that image. You can opt out. Personally, I opt out. I never ever put anything into an AI system that I'm not prepared to have shared. Personal information, financial information, imagery, I take it as read that it's shared because you never really know where this stuff goes. We've got effective monitoring and takedown procedures. Some of the bots, etc., nowadays are very, very clever. Some of the imagery is very, very clever. But we are monitoring and we have takedown if people post either fake or misleading or damaging imagery. And we are transparent around our use of AI. I've already admitted that I've used AI partly in the creation of this. The line that we take is that I have a picture of one of the bunnies sitting on a motorbike with a shotgun and sunglasses and a leather jacket, Terminator 2 or Bunninator if you prefer. I do not tag that as AI because I reckon most people can work it out. If I was using a realistic image such as the young girl that I showed you earlier, I would flag that as AI. I would make sure that people understood that this was an AI generated image, that I was not trying to mislead them. We do not create deep fakes, not even for fun. We should just draw a line on that and say, no, we don't. We have procedures to safeguard against these. This is a rapidly increasing and very serious threat, particularly to women and children. You should have procedures to safeguard the imagery on your website, the imagery on your social media posts. You should be making sure that people are being protected. We have guides for that if you need it. And dignity and respect for others. It is always about our beneficiaries. It's not about us. So we would never use imagery that's seen as exploitative or dehumanizing, poverty porn. We avoid stereotypes and we represent diverse groups fairly. We recognize cultural sensitivities. Um, you need to be a little bit careful about this. It's easy for it to slip through. So, for example, I generate an image of a Senegalese man, went out there last year, great people, and he's wearing a Maasai kilt. The Maasai are East African. Well, I mean, seriously, who's going to notice that? It's not a big deal, is it? What about putting a Scottish kilt on a Welshman? How well would that go down? Probably not. Well, Senegalese and Maasai, it's the same thing. And that's something you do need to be careful about. It can be quite difficult to spot that you've got that headdress or something wrong, but it is important to the people who are seeing it. We don't use imagery that sexualizes or objectifies an individual. A lot of AI generated imagery, it is reflecting the internet. That's what it's trained on in large measure. If you ask the internet for a picture of a woman, guess what you get back? It's reflecting us. So just be mindful that when you do it, to be careful. And accuracy is really, really important. I spoke to a designer. He did a hyper realistic cartoon of someone in a wheelchair. And he got the equipment wrong. It was quite complex equipment. He didn't know what it did, and they were really offended. You say you're working to help us. You haven't even bothered to check that what you've done is accurate. We don't like that. So things like getting medical equipment in cultural dress accurate, actually, that really matters to people. And we recognize creativity. And it's a phrase that I like. We use AI to enhance, not replace this. Um, Different people will take different tacks on this. I think all of us should reflect creativity when we're using imagery. So I might think about using um, a long dead artist, but Tracy Emin, it would not be appropriate to use her work. And content. Imagery is used in a context that accurately represents the situation. So we don't fiddle the photograph so that it looks as if we've got many adoring people. We never use misleading or sensationalized content. We have a message to give, sensationalizing it is playing to the gallery. We should not do that. We're transparent about the sources of the images. If it's AI, we say it's AI. And the purpose for which these are being used. So there's a famous image of women in burqas standing in a queue outside what appears to be a French Social Security office. It isn't actually, it was a fake image. And it was part of an article, and this is about Muslims in France, blah, 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 blah. The message from the image was, is there a bunch of scroungers over here taking our benefits? That's what the message from it was. That was wrong. So you don't need to say it for it to be wrong. So when I look at your image, what I should get is a clear message, and that purpose for sending me that message should be clear and transparent and reasonable. And minimizing potential harm. We need to get our message over. Some of the things that we deal with are not nice. Abusive women and others, are not nice subjects. And we should not hold back. And the Charity Commission guidance does not require us to hold back. We must do it in a certain way, though. So we may use imagery that's provocative or challenging. Now, what we do in Charity Excellence, and I'm not suggesting you should copy us, is we use what we call objective offence. The world is full of people who can get offended, but the fact that you're offended does not make something unreasonable. So if I give you an example, if I was to put an image of a transgender person on our website, and someone came to me and said, I have specific religious beliefs, I find that picture of a transgender person offensive. I want it taken down. We have two tests. The first one is, would a reasonable percentage or proportion of our community find that image offensive? No, they wouldn't. And is there any harm arising from me using that image? No. And might there be any harm to that individual? So if that was a transgender person outside a women's refuge and it had their image on it and it geolocation data, actually that could be harmful to that individual. I wouldn't use it like that. I would be careful about that. But effectively, I would go back to the person and say, I'm really sorry you're offended. That's absolutely not what we would ever wish to do. But no, I am not going to take that image down. What about an image of Andrew Tate? Well, I think a very large proportion of our community would find that offensive. I would not post that. What about an image of a transgender person carrying a placard that says Andrew Tate should be punched in the face? I wouldn't use that because there is a risk of harm, either from stirring trouble up about being aggressive or suggesting the risk of harm to Andrew Tate. Would I be bothered about Andrew Tate being harmed personally? No. But on a practical level, as a charity, we will not post images that pose risk or harm to anyone. And that's the way that we approach these contentious issues. You don't need to copy us. I sometimes get it wrong. I frequently get it wrong. But we would only post what would be considered a provocative image where there is a clear need linked to our charitable mission and what we're doing, and there isn't a reasonable alternative. If there's another way of doing it that isn't challenging, then I would use the other way. And the benefits must always outweigh the harm. So there may be a very good reason to put, if we used images of the women from the refuge, it would absolutely supercharge the fundraising campaign, but not if it really caused risk and harm to them. It must always more benefit than harm. And we strip out personal or identifying information. The bots nowadays are extremely clever. So the picture of a young girl, and this is Susie Smith from the Year 7 football team at the RC Church Primary School. Absolutely no way. I would not do that. And be aware that media can have hidden geolocation information. So always be mindful about what can't be seen. Make sure that you're not giving away information that could be detrimental to an individual or to your charity. And we've procedures to minimize the risk of deepfakes and other misuse. They can strip images out of your website, out of your social media, out of your video. There are all sorts that can be done. You need to make sure that you have procedures to keep people as safe as you reasonably can. We've got guide for that if you need it. And legal and regulatory. Um, Obviously, you must comply with it. Consent for any imagery is an absolute must, obviously. It's kept secure and for no longer than necessary. That may be an absolutely fabulous, cute photograph of that 6-year-old girl, but now that she's a young teenager, she may be utterly mortified that her friends might find out that there's that picture of her. So we do need to think we just can't keep and use this stuff indefinitely. Obviously, we don't breach copyright or IP, and we do not promote political parties or illegal purposes. So a picture of a placard that says kill Andrew Tate, that's an incitement to hatred. We shouldn't do that. And we must not promote politics. And we have a whole series of guidance. You're welcome to help yourself. You can find all of this in detail online on the website as part of our imagery guide. I hope you found that helpful. I hope you can take things from it that you can use in your own charity. And thank you for listening to me. Goodbye.